Colorado Territory, 1876. Quentin Lawson reined his horse to a stop at the crest of the hill, wiping sweat from his brow as the late September sun beat down on his shoulders. At 24, he'd been working this stretch of land for nearly 3 years now, but the view of his modest ranch nestled in the valley below still filled him with quiet pride. The small cabin, barn, and corral weren't much compared to some of the larger spreads, but they were his, built with his own 2 hands after leaving his family's farm in Kansas with dreams of carving out his own future. His chestnut hair ruffled in the breeze as he adjusted his hat. From this distance, the ranch looked peaceful, but Quentin knew better than anyone how precarious his situation had become. 3 years of hard work, and now drought threatened everything he'd built. His cattle were thin, the creek running lower each day. He pushed the worry aside, spurring his horse down the hill. As he approached the ranch, something caught his eye, movement where there shouldn't be any. Quentin tensed, his hand moving instinctively to the revolver at his hip. Times were hard, and desperate men sometimes did desperate things. He slowed his horse to a cautious walk as he drew closer. What he saw made him draw up short. A wagon with a broken wheel sat beside his cabin. Beside it, a woman in a dusty blue dress was attempting to calm a fretting child. She couldn't have been more than 22, with honey blonde hair escaping from beneath a simple bonnet. The child, a little girl no older than 4, clung to her mother's skirts, her face tear-streaked and frightened. Quentin approached cautiously, keeping his expression neutral. Strangers weren't common this far from town, especially not a woman traveling alone with a child. "Ma'am," he called out, tipping his hat as he dismounted. "Seems you've had some trouble." The woman turned, startled by his voice. Close up, he could see the exhaustion in her face, though it did nothing to diminish her beauty. High cheekbones, full lips, and eyes the color of a clear summer sky. There was wariness in those eyes, and something else. Fear. "I'm sorry for trespassing, sir," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Our wheel broke, and I wasn't sure what to do. The next town is still miles away according to my map." She gestured helplessly at the wagon. "I tried to fix it myself, but I'm Quentin Lawson. This is my ranch." He smiled, trying to put her at ease. "And you are?" She hesitated, seeming to weigh her words carefully. "Vivian Rhodes. This is my daughter, Emma." The little girl peered around her mother's skirts with curious eyes. She had the same blonde hair as her mother, though hers was tied back with a faded ribbon. "Pleased to meet you both," Quentin said, crouching down to the girl's level. "That's quite a journey for such a little lady." Emma didn't respond, but her grip on her mother's dress loosened slightly. "Where are you headed, Mrs. Rhodes?" He stood, noting how Vivian stiffened at the title. "It's Miss," she corrected quietly. "And west." "Just west." The vague answer raised questions in Quentin's mind, but he didn't press. Everyone in these parts had their secrets, himself included. "Well, that won't fix itself before nightfall," he said, glancing at the sun's position. "You're welcome to stay the night. I can work on it in the morning." Relief flooded Vivian's face, quickly replaced by caution. "We couldn't impose. It's no imposition. I've got space." It wasn't entirely true. His cabin was small, just 2 rooms, but he couldn't in good conscience send a woman and child back out as evening approached. "You can have the cabin. I'll sleep in the barn." Vivian studied him, clearly trying to decide if he could be trusted. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson. We're grateful." As Quentin showed them to the cabin, he couldn't help but notice the lightness of their belongings. One trunk, hastily packed from the look of it. No family photographs or keepsakes visible among their possessions. Just clothing, a few books, and a small wooden horse that Emma clutched tightly. "You're running from something," he thought but didn't say. Instead, he set about preparing a simple supper, aware of Vivian's eyes tracking his movements as if anticipating danger. "I'm not one to pry into others' business," he said finally, setting plates of beans and cornbread on the table. "But if there's trouble following you, I should probably know about it." Vivian's hand trembled slightly as she helped Emma into a chair. "It's not what you think," she said softly. "We're not criminals. Never thought you were." She met his eyes then, searching for sincerity. Whatever she found seemed to satisfy her, at least partially. "It's my brother-in-law," she admitted. "After my husband died last year, he made certain expectations clear. When I refused his advances, he threatened to take Emma. said a woman alone couldn't raise a child properly. Her voice hardened. He's the mayor of our town. His word carries weight. Quentin nodded slowly, understanding dawning. A widow with no protector, at the mercy of a powerful man's whims. It was an unfortunately common story. So you left. In the night, she confirmed, her gaze dropping to Emma, who was happily focused on her food. We have family in California. Or at least, I hope we still do. I haven't had contact with my cousin in years, but she's all we have left. The confession hung in the air between them, a test of his character. Would he turn them away, knowing they were essentially fugitives? Or worse, would he try to take advantage of her vulnerable position? Quentin did neither. Instead, he simply passed her the cornbread. Well, that won't be easy to fix. Might take a few days. You're welcome to stay until it's done. The relief in Vivian's eyes was palpable, though she quickly masked it. That's very kind. After supper, Quentin excused himself to tend to the animals, giving Vivian time to settle Emma for the night. As he forked hay into the horse stalls, his mind raced with questions. He had enough problems of his own without inviting more. The drought, dwindling funds, the possibility of losing everything if the winter was harsh. Taking in strangers, especially ones potentially being pursued, was risky. Yet something about Vivian's quiet dignity and obvious love for her daughter touched him. He recognized the fierce determination to build a better life. It was what had driven him west, after all. As darkness fell, Quentin arranged blankets in the corner of the barn, resigned to an uncomfortable night. He was just settling in when the barn door creaked open, revealing Vivian's silhouette. "Mr. Lawson?" she called softly. "Emma's asleep. I thought perhaps we could talk." They sat on bales of hay as Vivian explained more of her situation. Her brief marriage to a kind man who died from pneumonia, the gradual closing of doors as her brother-in-law, Mayor Joseph Preston, isolated her from friends and potential employment. The final confrontation when he drunkenly declared his intentions to marry her, whether she consented or not. "He said he'd declare me unfit if I refused," she whispered, twisting her hands in her lap. The thought of Emma in his house. "I couldn't risk it." "You did what any mother would do," Quentin assured her. She looked up, moonlight from the barn window illuminating unshed tears. "And what about you, Mr. Lawson? What brought you to this lonely stretch of land?" He found himself telling her about his family's farm in Kansas, his 3 older brothers who would inherit what little there was, his decision to seek his own fortune. "Not much of a fortune so far," he admitted with a rueful smile, gesturing to the modest barn around them. "Droughts hit us hard this year. Yet you took in strangers without hesitation," Vivian observed quietly. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition of kindred spirits, perhaps. 2 people fighting against circumstances, determined to forge their own path. The moment stretched, then broke as Quentin stood. "It's late. You should get some rest." As Vivian left the barn, she paused at the door. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson." "Truly." "Quentin," he corrected. "If you're staying a while, might as well use my given name." She smiled then, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "Good night, Quentin." "Good night, Vivian." As he settled back onto his makeshift bed, Quentin found himself more troubled by his reaction to Vivian than by her circumstances. It had been a long time since he'd felt such an immediate connection to anyone, and the timing couldn't be worse. He had a ranch on the brink of failure, and she was running from a powerful man, heading for California. Yet as sleep claimed him, it was the image of her smile that lingered in his mind. The next morning, Quentin rose early and set about examining the wagon. The damage was worse than he'd initially thought. Not just a broken wheel, but a cracked axle as well. It would take time to repair, possibly requiring parts from town. When Vivian emerged from the cabin with Emma, he delivered the news as gently as possible. "It'll be at least a week before I can get it fixed properly. Maybe longer." Instead of the dismay he expected, relief flashed across her face. "A week," she repeated softly. "I suppose we have no choice but to accept your hospitality a while longer." Emma, more animated than the previous day, pointed excitedly at the horses in the corral. "Mama, look." "Yes, sweetheart, I see them," Vivian said, smoothing her daughter's hair. "Would you like to meet them?" Quentin offered. At Emma's eager nod, he led them to the corral, lifting the child to pet his gentlest mare. The girl's delighted giggles transformed her face, and by extension, her mother's. For a moment, The worry lines disappeared from Vivian's forehead as she watched her daughter's joy. She hasn't laughed like that in months, Vivian said quietly. As the days passed, a routine developed. Quentin continued his ranch work while Vivian took over cooking and mending clothes that had long needed attention. Emma followed Quentin like a shadow whenever he was near the cabin, peppering him with questions about the animals and his work. On the fourth day, as they sat down to a supper of rabbit stew that Vivian had prepared, Emma announced, "I like it here. Can we stay forever?" The innocent question hung in the air. Vivian's cheeks flushed as she gently corrected her daughter. "Remember, Emma, we're going to California to see Cousin Margaret. But I like it here with Mr. Quentin," Emma insisted with a child's directness. "He tells good stories and doesn't shout like Uncle Joseph." Quentin saw the flash of pain in Vivian's eyes at the mention of her brother-in-law. "Well, Miss Emma," he said carefully, "sometimes we have to go places we don't want to find something better. Is California better than here?" Emma asked skeptically. The question prompted a smile from both adults, easing the tension. "It's different," Quentin explained. "More people, big cities, the ocean." "What's an ocean?" As Quentin described the vast body of water to the wide-eyed child, he caught Vivian watching him with an unreadable expression. Later, after Emma was asleep, she joined him on the cabin's small porch. "You're good with her," Vivian said, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the evening chill. "She's never taken to anyone so quickly." "She's a special girl," Quentin replied. "Smart, like her mother." Vivian smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I worry about what I'm doing to her, uprooting her this way. She should have a stable home, friends, family. You're giving her something more important, a mother who would do anything to protect her." Quentin hesitated, then added, "My father wasn't like your brother-in-law, but he was a hard man. Unforgiving. My mother stayed, thought it was her duty. None of us were better for it." The confession surprised even himself. He rarely spoke of his family, of the tension that had ultimately driven him west. Vivian studied him in the fading light. "Is that why you left? To escape him?" "Partly," Quentin admitted. "Partly to prove I could make something of myself without his help. Not doing a very good job of that lately." He gestured to the parched fields beyond the cabin. "You have a home," Vivian said softly. "Land. Purpose. That's more than many can claim." "It won't be mine much longer if the drought continues," he found himself confessing. "I'm behind on payments to the bank. Without rain soon." He shook his head, unsure why he was burdening her with his problems. Vivian's hand found his in the darkness, a brief, comforting touch. Then we're both facing uncertain futures. The simple touch ignited something in Quentin, a longing he'd suppressed since her arrival. He withdrew his hand carefully, not trusting himself. "I should check on that wagon wheel," he said, standing abruptly. "Good night, Vivian." As he walked to the barn, Quentin berated himself for his reaction. Vivian was vulnerable, fleeing one man's unwanted attention. The last thing she needed was his growing attraction complicating matters. Yet that night, as he lay awake in the barn, he found himself imagining what it would be like if Emma's innocent wish came true. If they could stay, if his modest ranch could become a home for all of them. "Foolish thinking," he muttered to the darkness. "Even if she wanted to stay, I can't support myself, let alone a woman and child." The next morning, Quentin rode to town for supplies and to inquire about wagon parts. The general store owner, Sidney Parker, raised his eyebrows at Quentin's list of purchases. "Bit more than your usual, Lawson," he observed, noting the coffee, sugar, and fabric among the items. "Someone staying with you?" Quentin kept his expression neutral. "Just stocking up." Parker wasn't fooled. "Heard tell a woman and child passed through Mineral Springs last week, heading west. Pretty blonde woman, about 22, with a little girl." His tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp. Quentin's hand stilled on the counter. "Is that so? Seems there's a fellow looking for them. Well-dressed man came through yesterday, asking questions. Said she was his sister-in-law, that she wasn't right in the head after her husband passed. Worried about the child." Cold dread settled in Quentin's stomach. "What did you tell him?" Parker shrugged. "Nothing to tell. Haven't seen any woman and child." He leaned closer. "But if I had, I might warn her that Mayor Preston from over Silverton Way is mighty determined to find her, offering a reward and everything." Quentin nodded slowly, understanding the implicit warning. "Appreciate the information, Parker. One more thing. Parker added as Quentin gathered his purchases. That man asking questions? He's staying at the hotel. Plans to canvass the outlying homesteads tomorrow. The ride back to the ranch seemed endless as Quentin's mind raced with possibilities. Preston had tracked them this far. It was only a matter of time before he found Vivian and Emma. The wagon was nowhere near ready. The part he needed wouldn't arrive for another 3 days at least. As the ranch came into view, Quentin saw Emma chasing butterflies while Vivian hung laundry on a line stretched between 2 trees. The domestic scene struck him with unexpected force, making his chest tighten with emotion. In just a week, they'd transformed his solitary existence, bringing warmth and life to the empty spaces. Now he had to tell Vivian that their brief sanctuary was compromised. She knew something was wrong the moment he dismounted. Sending Emma to collect eggs from the chicken coop, she approached him with concern etched on her face. What happened? Quentin relayed Parker's warning, watching as the color drained from Vivian's cheeks. He'll be here by tomorrow afternoon at the latest, he concluded. We have to leave, she whispered, her eyes darting to Emma. Tonight. We can't wait for the wagon. And go where? On foot with a child? Quentin shook his head. The next town is 20 miles away. Preston would catch up to you before you made it halfway. Then what do you suggest? A note of desperation crept into her voice. Quentin hesitated, the plan that had formed on the ride home suddenly seeming presumptuous. There's another option, he said carefully. But I'm not sure you'll like it. At this point, I'll consider anything. Marry me. The words hung between them, stark and unexpected. Vivian's eyes widened. What? If we're married, Preston has no claim on you or Emma. Quentin explained, the words tumbling out faster than he intended. As your husband, I'd have legal right to protect you both. He couldn't take Emma without challenging me directly, and from what you've said, he's more the type to use his position and influence than physical force. Vivian stared at him, her expression a complex mixture of shock, confusion, and something else he couldn't identify. You would do that? Marry a stranger to protect her from another man. You're hardly a stranger anymore, Vivian. Quentin ran a hand through his hair, suddenly self-conscious. I know it's not ideal. I'm not offering much. A struggling ranch, an uncertain future. And I'm not expecting. That is, it would be in name only, until you decide what you want to do. If you still want to go to California after Preston gives up, I won't stop you. Vivian's gaze dropped to her clasped hands. That's a tremendous sacrifice to make for people you barely know. Is it? Quentin asked quietly. These past days with you and Emma. My cabin feels like a home for the first time since I built it. He took a deep breath, deciding honesty was the only fair approach. I'm not saying I'm in love with you, Vivian. We've known each other too briefly for that. But I care about what happens to you both, and I think, given time, there could be something real between us. The confession hung in the air between them, more revealing than he'd intended. Vivian raised her eyes to his, searching. And if there isn't? If it never becomes real? Then we part ways, no hard feelings. I'll help you get to California myself. He managed to smile. I'm not looking to trade one prison for another, Vivian. I just want to give you a choice. Emma's return with a basket of eggs interrupted the tense moment. Vivian smoothed her skirts, composing herself. I need time to think, she said quietly. Of course, but not too much time, Quentin cautioned. Preston will be here tomorrow. Throughout the afternoon, Vivian was unusually quiet, her gaze distant as she went through the motions of cooking and caring for Emma. After supper, she asked Quentin to watch her daughter while she went for a walk alone. He agreed, settling on the porch with Emma to identify constellations as they appeared in the darkening sky. Mr. Quentin, Emma said suddenly, do you have a mama and papa? I do, he answered carefully. They live far away, in Kansas. Do you miss them? He considered the question. Sometimes. I miss the good parts, my mother's cooking, working with my brothers. But families are complicated, Emma. Sometimes people who love each other still hurt each other. The child nodded solemnly, as if his words confirmed something she already understood. Like Uncle Joseph. He said he loved us, but he made Mama cry. Quentin's heart tightened at the simple observation. Your mother is very brave, you know. Everything she does for you. Emma leaned against his side, a gesture of trust that moved him deeply. I want to stay here with you and Mama, she said sleepily. It feels safe. As the child drifted off against his shoulder, Quentin spotted Vivian returning from her walk. Her face was composed, determined. She sat beside him on the porch, her gaze soft as it fell on her sleeping daughter. "I'll marry you," she said quietly. "Not just because of Preston, though that's reason enough, but because in 1 week, you've shown Emma more kindness than she's seen in the years since her father died." She met his eyes steadily. "I can't promise my heart, Quentin. Not yet. But I can promise to try to build something real, as you said." Relief and something warmer flooded through him. "That's all I ask." "There's one condition," Vivian added. "If the ranch fails, if the drought continues and you lose this place, we leave together. I won't have you staying out of obligation while your dreams die." Quentin nodded slowly, understanding her need for this assurance. "Agreed." The next morning, they rode into town at dawn. Judge Hollister, a friend of Parker's, agreed to perform a quick ceremony in his office. Parker and his wife stood as witnesses, their knowing smiles suggesting they understood more than was said about the hastily arranged marriage. The ceremony was brief, practical. Yet when Quentin placed a simple gold band on Vivian's finger, his mother's, sent to him years ago, for when he found the right girl, something shifted between them. The vows, spoken in clear, steady voices, carried more weight than either had perhaps anticipated. They returned to the ranch by mid-morning, just in time to see a sleek buggy approaching from the east. Preston had found them. Quentin helped Vivian down from the wagon, whispering, "Let me handle this." The man who emerged from the buggy was exactly as Vivian had described, well-dressed, handsome in a polished way, with cold eyes that assessed the modest ranch with obvious disdain. "Mayor Preston," Quentin called, stepping forward while Vivian retreated to the porch where Emma waited. "What brings you to my property?" Preston's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm looking for a woman and child, my late brother's wife and daughter. I have reason to believe they passed this way." His gaze moved to the porch, recognition flaring. "Ah, there they are. Vivian, this has gone on long enough. It's time to come home." "She is home," Quentin stated firmly, blocking Preston's path. "Vivian is my wife now. We were married this morning." Shock, then fury crossed Preston's face. "That's impossible. You can't have." "We have," Vivian called, her voice steady as she moved to Quentin's side. Judge Hollister performed the ceremony himself. Everything is legal and binding. Preston's jaw worked as he processed this unexpected development. "This is absurd. You've known this, rancher, for what, a week? You belong in Silverton, with people who know you, who can provide for you properly." His gaze swept dismissively over Quentin's work clothes. "Look at this place. You'd trade comfort and position for this." "I'd trade anything for peace and freedom," Vivian replied, her hand finding Quentin's. "Emma is happy here. I'm happy here." "This is a mistake," Preston insisted, his composure slipping. "You're not thinking clearly. When Gerald died, you made it clear you considered me and Emma your property," Vivian interrupted, a new strength in her voice. "We're not. We never were." She lifted her chin. "I suggest you leave, Joseph. There's nothing for you here." For a moment, it seemed Preston might argue further. His eyes darted between them, calculating. Finally, he stepped back. "This isn't over," he warned. "A hastily arranged marriage won't stand legal scrutiny. I'll have my lawyers look into it." "You do that," Quentin replied evenly. "In the meantime, you're trespassing on my land." With a final glare, Preston returned to his buggy and drove away. Only when he was out of sight did Vivian's composure crack, her hand trembling in Quentin's. "He'll be back," she whispered. "Or he'll send someone. He doesn't give up easily." Quentin turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Let him come. We'll face him together, as a family." The word hung between them, family. So simple, yet so profound in its implications. That night, after Emma was asleep, they sat on the porch discussing practical matters, sleeping arrangements. Quentin would continue in the barn for now, finances, combining their meager resources, and the future of the ranch. "If the rain doesn't come soon," Quentin admitted, "we might have to sell some of the cattle at a loss. Enough to get us through winter, at least." Vivian was quiet for a moment, then said, "I have something that might help." She disappeared into the cabin, returning with a small pouch she extracted from her trunk. "It was my mother's," she explained, opening it to reveal a gold necklace with a modest diamond pendant. "I was saving it for Emma when she's older, but—" "No," Quentin said firmly. closing her hand around the jewelry. "That stays with you, for Emma. We'll find another way." The look of gratitude she gave him was worth more than any diamond. As the evening deepened around them, conversation drifted to lighter topics: childhood memories, favorite books, dreams deferred but not abandoned. When Vivian finally rose to retire, she hesitated, then leaned down to place a gentle kiss on Quentin's cheek. "Good night, husband." The word sent warmth spreading through him. "Good night, wife," he responded softly. Days stretched into weeks, and slowly, the awkwardness of their arrangement gave way to genuine companionship. Vivian proved to be not just a capable homemaker but a shrewd manager, finding ways to stretch their limited resources. She suggested bartering eggs and milk with neighboring farms for items they needed, reducing their dependence on store-bought goods. Emma blossomed under the stability of their new family unit, following Quentin around the ranch and absorbing everything he taught her about animals and the land. Her nightmares, which had been frequent during their first days at the ranch, gradually subsided. And then, a month after their hasty wedding, the rains came. It began with distant thunder one afternoon as Quentin repaired a fence line. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, advancing steadily toward the ranch. By evening, the first heavy drops were falling, drumming on the cabin roof with increasing intensity. Vivian stood at the window, watching in wonder as the parched earth drank in the life-giving moisture. Quentin joined her, his expression one of relief and cautious hope. "If it continues like this for a few days," he said, "the creek will fill again. The grass will recover. We might just make it." Vivian turned to him, her eyes shining with something more than just reflection of the rain-washed landscape. "We will make it," she said with quiet certainty. Together. That night, as the storm raged outside, something shifted between them. Perhaps it was the promise of renewal the rain brought, or perhaps it was simply time fulfilling its patient work. When Vivian reached for his hand across the table, Quentin felt the touch as keenly as lightning striking nearby. "It's been a month," she said softly. "You don't need to sleep in the barn anymore." The invitation in her words was clear, bringing heat to his face despite the coolness the rain had brought. "Are you sure?" Her answer was to stand, drawing him up with her. "I've never been more sure of anything." Later, as they lay together in the quiet aftermath of passion, the rain a gentle backdrop to their newfound intimacy, Quentin traced the curve of Vivian's cheek with wondering fingers. "I think I'm falling in love with you," he admitted, the darkness making confession easier. "Actually, I think I started falling the moment you stood up to Preston that first day." Vivian's hand found his, fingers intertwining. "I was so afraid when I came here," she whispered. "Not just of Joseph finding us, but of trusting anyone again, of believing in the possibility of happiness." She shifted closer, her head fitting perfectly against his shoulder. "You've given me back that belief, Quentin. You've given us a home." As autumn deepened into winter, the ranch thrived under their combined care. The rains had come in time to save the worst of the crisis, and though they still needed to be careful with resources, the immediate threat of foreclosure had passed. Preston made one more attempt to challenge their marriage, sending a lawyer with threats of legal action, but retreated when faced with signed marriage documents and witnesses willing to testify to the legitimacy of the union. By spring, as new grass carpeted the hills and calves wobbled beside their mothers in the pasture, Vivian had news of her own to share. Standing in the doorway of the cabin, watching Quentin teach Emma how to gentle a new foal, she placed a hand over her still flat stomach, anticipation fluttering inside her. That evening, after Emma was asleep, she told him. The joy that transformed his face was worth every hardship they'd endured, every uncertain step that had brought them to this moment. "A baby," he repeated, gathering her into his arms with reverent hands. "Our baby. Are you happy?" she asked, though his expression had already answered. Happy doesn't begin to describe it. He kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and future. "When I built this place, I thought land was the only treasure worth having. I was so wrong, Vivian. You and Emma, and now this little one. You're the real treasure. Everything else is just dirt and timber." 5 years later, Quentin stood on the same hill where he'd first spotted Vivian and Emma by his cabin. The ranch had changed in that time, expanded, improved, with a larger house replacing the original cabin, more cattle grazing the renewed pastures, and a small orchard beginning to bear fruit. But the real changes were in the lives now intertwined with his. Emma, now 9, raced her pony along the fence line, her blonde braids flying behind her. 3-year-old James, named for Vivian's father, toddled after chickens in the yard while his mother, her belly rounded with their 3rd child, laughed at his determined pursuit. As he watched his family, Quentin reflected on how close he'd come to losing everything. If the wheel of Vivian's wagon hadn't broken, if he hadn't been there that day, if the drought had forced him to abandon the ranch, so many moments could have gone differently. Instead, a stranger and her child had become his greatest treasure, far more valuable than land or cattle or gold. In saving them, he'd saved himself, finding purpose and love where he least expected it. Vivian looked up then, spotting him on the hill. Her smile, still capable of taking his breath away after all this time, beckoned him home. As he urged his horse down the slope, Quentin knew with absolute certainty that some treasures couldn't be measured or weighed. They could only be felt, in the warmth of a family gathered around a table, in the trust of a child's hand in his, in the love of a woman who had chosen to build a life with him. Some treasures, he had learned, were found only when you opened your heart and your home to those in need. And those were the treasures worth everything.